Hello again, everyone. I'm Max Louis, and I bid you all a fantastic and very, very inspirationally mad uh, March, since it's the first day of March today. And I'm just going to continue reading sections from my playful philosophical book, Gaslit by Madman, Dr. Mad Max quotes. As I try to explain, Gaslit by Madman is a dual meaning in that title. Firstly, I was very crudely made to feel crazy or made crazy and very badly mistreated by a madman, in this case a doctor of the NHS UK. And on the other hand, I am the madman gaslighting the whole society by questioning its reality in a certain respect, which I see as the duty and the true function of a philosopher. Put in other words than as is usually described. Philosophy is and always has been, true philosophy has been a very, very positive and gentle, loving form of gaslighting. And indeed, if you read Nietzsche's The Gay Science, the madman who announces the death of God is in fact, he's holding a gaslight, a gaslit lantern. Isn't that wonderful? Um, so as I say, defending my work in my one of my own parables, are you mad? A Q&A with a madman, Max Louis. Now, are you mad? Well, I intend my writing to be a kind of like intoxication of wine and berries, the true pleasure of thought, of human thought and philosophy, which will hopefully do away with the need and prevent the need for a chemical psychiatric intoxication. You know. So before you accuse my thought thinking of being too dangerous and too intoxicating, consider what you're putting in your bodies in the under the name of medicine. Um, um, so this is a literal, Julie treasure trove of unorthodox, thought experiments. As I say at the beginning of the book, insane, sadistic thought experiments by the mad doctor, the mad hair doctor. Um, Emerging proud, a rallying cry. I wish that my story were an archetypal tale of awakening success, like Camelot, a name designating the contemporary Welsh town of Caerleon, where I was once committed, ending in the slaying of the dragon and a hero's homecoming to his rightful throne. Well, perhaps I am the dragon that's slain. Alas, my I shouldn't say that then, should I? Alas, my own story is more fitting for troubadours who dwell less on a romance and more on chicanery. And even then, without the click at ending that might at least give the one tale, its mythic resonance. No tragic sudden demise, but rather long drawn out, tortuous thwarting of the bloom of years, serving only to truncate and mediocre the otherwise hilly peaks, rather than to give them relief by way of the equally necessary valleys, cascaded with the rivers of sweet, sorrowful, and cathartic tears, only to enhance the grandeur of their eventual triumph. So let me just explain that paragraph briefly. Well, essentially, I don't see, certain types of sadness and, you know, um, ambivalent, events, and tragedy, even, is necessarily an exception to life, as Nietzsche put it. I don't see these things as necessarily, detracting from the general scheme, always necessarily. But I mean, what I experienced is very difficult to make anything positive out of because it was literally, just a complete stunting for 12, agonizing years. So I feel that it's not like, an added ingredient that makes, life more profound. Instead, it just truncates it. Does a lobotomy provide more artistic outlet for the patient in future? There's some kinds of negative, tragic, you know, happenings which you cannot make good out of, whereas there are others that you can make good out of. So I'm whining here that I didn't get the right tragedies, because I didn't get good tragedies for me. I don't think. Um, More cenotaph than seneschal. I cannot claim to be an avatar for others. I am more a warning of the way not to travel. Yet for those who have the subtle fingers for nuances, as Nietzsche said, an eye for the devil is in the detail, I believe that many hard but crucial lessons can still be learned from my own unfortunate escapade. You have to be very, 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 very good mind though to be able to pick them up because they've been so shrouded in nonsense last over the course of the last couple of decades. Uh, they can still many crucial lessons can still be learned from my own unfortunate escapade. It should help prevent the need for others to experience them in the regrettable and highly prodigal way that I did. Rather than revealing all just yet, though, here I shall merely attempt to summarize such hard-fought wisdom. So essentially, what I'm saying is that although I've actually recovered quite a bit more since I wrote this, in many ways I'm still kind of falling short of my own ideals. In many ways, my own ideals and my own, morals, if you want to put it that way, are more demanding than I've managed to live up to through, rather little fault of my own. So in a way, what I'm saying is, listen to what I say, not what I do. Do what I say, not what I do. What I say, not what I do. And consider me a stark warning of what happens when you mistreat and violate a young person under the guise of professional care. Um, with presumably supposedly good intentions, even. Um, and don't judge me entirely on my appearance. Although, in fact, most people, in fact, didn't even strive to be, a model at the beginning, right? You know, most people don't try to live their truth, often, but I did. So I'm an exception already in that respect. And in many ways, I still really do try to be, the best person I can be. And I may, in fact, have many good things to teach others and be a decent example in lots of ways. So it would be hypocritically self derogatory for me to say otherwise. But it's a great disappointment to me that I was not able to do a better job, or I have not been able to do a better job than I've done so far. And for that, I level the accusation at psychiatry for not giving me the chance to create myself over the last 13 years in my youth, which was precisely what I was waiting for, that opportunity which was stolen from me. As I say starkly in one of my poems, Clap Those Who's, the world is not out to love you, it's out to shove you. Have no doubt what we are facing here is a merciless life-death struggle, where the outcome will determine not only the quality and bearableness of your own existence, but the ultimate rulers of this planet. Let that certainly steel your resolve and spur you to awaken from the dogmatic, ideological, pre-programmed slumbers of your youth and so-called education. There is no time for frivolity, for messing around. We are taught, we are led by our masters, those who seek power and profit above all else, to believe that this world is a mere fairground ride or all but perfectly ordered machine where we can just afford to while away the hours, days, and years of our lives on mindless entertainment, or getting our noses in front of the Joneses in the preordained, rightful rat race, safe in the knowledge that should we fall or fail, a sympathetic all knowing system will take care of us. One look at history, slaughter upon slaughter, oppressive government after oppressive government, or the real nature of the so called caring system in which tens, hundreds, or thousands, or even millions of innocent, trusting people are drugged, often forcibly, into oblivion by poisons that are scientifically proven to damage and shrink the brain. And the curtains begin to fall away a little bit. Truly, the world is so difficult to fathom. And if you start making claims that you can't totally prove, they will seize their opportunity and strike where you're vulnerable. Thus, I limit myself to what I know with certainty and make only a few reasonable calculations and deductions from actual knowledge. I know from my very own personal experience, along with countless testimonies of other also patient patients, that this present system forcibly poisons and detains such numbers of people in a way that I can testify, without a shred of doubt from my own experience, from their own research papers, their own certified doctors, and from any logical, non-ideologically motivated insights into the nature of the process, causes immense iatrogenic harm, which can range from what they call, in other circumstances, post-traumatic stress disorder, to a variety of known and undoubtedly some still unknown disabling brain and body ailments. I deduce from this that there can't be any trust in either the benevolence or the competence of our governments. That trust has been disproven or taken away by the self-respecting intellect. Henceforth, all conspiracy theories remain on the table. The only rationale against them, the only thing that would turn them into a mental disorder, is the sacralization of blind, stupid trust, demonstrably false faith in the powers that be. This very sacralization and the enormous will to impose stigma on the questioning of society's foundation it represents is itself the ultimate affront to free minds and sufficient refutation of the so-called science in question. Thus, we have already encountered two enormous reasons for so far from trusting the benevolence of the powers that be, actually asserting their probable malevolence. Though this case could be no doubt explored in infinitely greater and more deserving scope, for reasons that have already been alluded to, along with want of space, I'll just rest my case here. So briefly, what do I offer in place of this saccharine, self-serving, deceptive trust? What I offer is the myriad and wondrous nature of your own personal lived experience, and the unfathomably mysterious, wondrous, the often unspeakably brutal and implacably foreign nature of the universe, which calls out for our own independent inspection, free of all preconceived dogmas and just so stories. What I offer is divine madness, poetically put, the lunatic curiosity and ultra-functioning of our epistemic faculties, the philosophy of living in such an uncertain world, together with the heroic endeavor and steely warrior mentality, which craves sacrifice, danger, and heavy loads, in the noble pursuit of the goals of personal and collective freedom, self-realization, betterment, and healing, due to the uniquely human power of the word. And yet, all too often is left, it nevertheless manages to find its frugal succor and sweetness of existence in the bare accomplishment of animal survival in a world so commonly arrayed against us. The joy of lifting the lid on our maniacal overlords, or joining them in their plot. Let the fact that we have all survived this long, so many generations up till now, that we are all at bottom forged like polished steel in the unforgiving Darwinian fires, give you heart and confidence for the future. But no, do not let it completely blind you to the stupid, everyday assumptions, herd-like stagnation, and complacency, which we have been raised, like farm cattle, to suffer. That's next time you get caught on the wrong side of history. That is merely facing your destiny. That is emerging proud. Harm, punish, or treat. If you harm, punish, or treat a bad man, he might just reconsider his wicked ways. But if you harm, punish, or treat a good one, he is often liable or prone to reconsider his good ways. See this. This is one of the after effects of my 12 years of expensive expert treatment. It's done something with my nervous system. And this is, I assure you, this is the tip of the iceberg over the last 12, 13 years. This is the residue that you're looking at. The disadvantages of self-control. The exhortation to self-control is really an exhortation to obedience and submission. When they said I lacked self-control, what they actually meant was I wasn't controlling myself according to their demands. And they proceeded to take actual self-control away from me in the most absolutely disastrous manner. 12, 13 years of utter madness and barren, dry, parched, desert sadness and anger. If we are really going to free ourselves of the crippling influence of convention and actually arbitrary, oppressive so-called authority, we probably ought to rid ourselves of all self-control that isn't absolutely necessary. Real change. The cave-dwelling masses and everyday non-patients, while also fatuously and recklessly embracing ideologies of social progress, are frightened of a real change in their being and locked into a pattern of stagnation and decay. The madman, remember the etymological meaning of the word mad is just change. The madman, at least in the normative, ideal sense of that term, as well as often he or she who is so labeled, has in fact awakened the need for spiritual becoming, both in himself and others. Madness and art. Madmen and poets are alike. They both give freer rein to their emotional and linguistic expressions than is considered decent. And both of them, too, do it largely for socially admirable therapeutic reasons. Albeit the mad one is more often misunderstood, since people forget that all life, and the unartistic life, most of all, is a good opportunity for art, for therapy. The unartistic life is the most drab, automatic, unredeemed kind of life, in which salutary disruptions are still possible. No one blinks twice if they see an eviscerated heart in an art gallery nowadays. But if they see an eviscerated heart, while it's still in someone's chest, that's magic. Or you could say a little less, barbarically, that if you see a real Mona Lisa, or perhaps, a real, sad-eyed Vincent van Gogh in real life, the flesh, that's magic too. And infinitely more valuable because it doesn't come with the state trappings, boring, circumscribed, walled off, nature, of being a piece of art, but actually brings life, turns life into art, which is the aim, real aim, of art, to make life beautiful, not to sell paintings. Autobiography of values is requisite. To counter the tide of artificial false pretenses to expert scientific objectivity and docile herd-like conformity that actually entails within social science, within the healing professions, and within society as a whole. I propose the personal account of one's life story, focusing on how one came to arrive at one's central integral values, become a standard for such careers. This would be a move towards bolstering the development of personality and character throughout society, preventing people from hiding entirely behind their professional veneers and presencing the real lived experience and actual rather than false selves of individuals. I don't propose this merely as a helpful task for the professional on the way to qualifying, but as a central piece that he must present to his or her client's patients. A kind of CV, but as I say, with the focus on how he came to his central convictions about life. Well, theoretically, society would be much better off if the notion of character development and personal growth was centered, as it actually is being, it is being more in many ways. So I'm just part of a, present day tide, obviously. Um, I mean, this would, if it were introduced, what it would do is basically share and open up the notion of genuine culture to more people and to the receivers of professional services, higher skilled so-called higher skilled professional services, and it would potentially make society more transparent and based on genuine integrity and living a good life than on certificates, empty certificates of so-called specialist fields of knowledge, which in reality are far less valuable. So, it's a fairly um, attractive proposal. It would obviously, force citizens to become more like philosophers to a certain extent. And the people who are the best philosophers, may in fact then attract the most, clients because they'd be the best at it. Um, but I don't really mean to, necessarily put forward radical transformations to society just now because I'm just, experimenting with thoughts at the moment. My philosophy is in its infancy. My aim is just to shed a little love and light for my readers and let them wonder what kind of world might be if such things were introduced. A philosopher is a philosopher's nature. The true philosopher tends to be a person who is generally, you know, at one with life, the world, the universe, and its society to a large extent. You know, in a sense of amor fati, as Nietzsche talked about, embrace of life and love of life and fate, but also somebody who is very able and enjoys entertaining alternatives. Um, that there is obviously room for more, being more proactive, but that's more. Um, but that can be extremely dangerous because it's much easier to make things worse than it is to make things better. You know, as Roger Scruton, explains, one of the main arguments for conservatism is that, well, there are lots of ways to destroy a building, to knock it down, to build it wrongly so it falls in on itself. Same with the society. There are lots of ways to tinker with it so that the whole machine just like explodes. Um, but the one thing we do know for sure is that society, as it is, you know, it's got as far as it has, and it's if we've got to the stage where we can be a philosopher ourselves, it's obviously supports life. We can say it supports life, which you can't say for all all societies at all times. You know, I'm looking at things from one point of view in my writing, and I'm certain that most of what I say is true, but it's only one perspective, or it's not only one perspective, but it's not necessarily the absolute whole perspective. There are other angles which could paint things in a different light. Not necessarily more valid, but they could paint things in a different light that could persuade most people of the exact opposite of what I'm trying to persuade people, because the poetry in my speech, in all philosophy, there's a certain amount of poetry, and including in my what I say. So it's the poetry that often persuades people more than the philosophy itself, and that's not you know um, a slur against the thinker or the philosopher. It's just inevitable. So essentially, one thing it's important to point out is that whenever a philosopher criticizes something, or whenever a social activist rails against something, there's a very interesting dynamic at play, which usually that individual doesn't talk much about. And that is their entire work and identity is parasitical on precisely the thing that they are trying to destroy and argue against. Um, that can be slightly more or less the case, but it's a general truthhood about the way we are all interrelated, and the way supposed criticism and critique acts. It is always dependent and thrives on precisely the thing it appears to be against. And what this is related to is the inherently dynamic nature of reality, the illusoriness of the notions of good and evil in many respects, or the deceitful nature of the notions of good and evil, the evil nature of the notions of good and evil, the dichotomy of good and evil. Um, so yeah, so this is this part of the dynamic nature of reality itself. And what it probably indicates to us that we can never be, or we should never be, we should never totally demonize or fail to recognize our independence on our own opponents. Um, because to do so makes matters worse and creates more enemies than need exist. Um, one envisages a nature in which the fundamental nature of the global ecosystem is not violent warfare, but essentially something close to dialogue. Beyond rational self-preservation, lock him up, he's a danger to himself. Enlightenment thinkers such as Thomas Hobbes and John Locke try to appeal to and foster what is called man's rational self-preservation, inserting it above all other goals as the centerpiece and pivot of the whole of society. Notice here the two concepts, reason on the one hand and self-preservation on the other, are heavily intertwined, which still remains the case today. Madness, on the other hand, is commonly associated with throwing caution to the wind, tightrope walking over a precipice, just for the sheer hell of it, and embracing a variety of dangers that may very well end in personal extinction. However, when one considers the nature of our own inevitable mortality, is making self preservation our highest goal really so rational? In order to face life in all its grim reality, is it not necessary at some point to eschew rational self preservation for a bold leap, if only in the imagination, if not outward practice, towards an affirmation and embrace of this inextricable fatality? Especially if one seeks to give birth to something greater than oneself, like Christ, and take on the great sacrifices that sometimes requires. In other words, rather than rational self preservation, isn't the ability for insane self annihilation of loving sacrifice equally or an even greater sign of maturity, of true morality? Thus also the Buddha would seem to have it, who equally, in view of the passing away of all earthly things, preached loss of self rather than the steady incremental Lockean accumulation of an estate that is eventually destined to perish anyway. He always said, out of compassion, to have given his life up to be voluntarily devoured by a starving tiger. Reminds me of those voluntary patients on the ward that I was on. Intellectual and spiritual progress occurs dialectically. When a thought arises to inner or outer speech, one has the chance to put a not in front of it, and often does for the first time. If it is not permitted to be thought or said, that doesn't mean it won't be. It merely continues to fester without questioning in resentful and inchoate silence. The question is, why do sane family members or doctors and nurses have such an enormous problem correctly even identifying their unwell relatives' extremely normal human needs? I mean, let alone, making the slightest effort to try to actually satisfy them. If it means going the slightest bit out of their way. Um,